My friends, welcome to episode 2 of Jalen's Jumpstart. And today I will be interviewing Arash Markazi. He is an American sports journalist and media personality. I had the opportunity to have Arash as my mentor for the Impact Learning Program. And I hope today I'll be able to provide some insight on his story and a little bit more about getting into the business of sports journalism, and anything sports related. So let me know what you all think and enjoy the show. What was your motive for really becoming such an iconic storyteller through sports?
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I loved sports when I was a child. I always was a big sports fan. I watched sports with my father, and when you're a kid, your dream is to actually play. But my family is quite short. My dad's 5'3", my mom's 5 foot, and so I knew that I probably wouldn't be a collegiate athlete or certainly not professional. So I began to write. I began to watch games and I got on. I first used like a pencil and paper, and then a computer, and then I just loved reading stories about sports. I loved sports movies. Um, so just like even as a child, I mean that was always my goal and my dream, and I knew that in grade school. So I mean sometimes you have to go through college to figure out what you want to do. I mean, I knew that I wanted to be involved in sports. I knew that I couldn't play it at a high level, so I knew when I was fairly young, I wanted to be a sports journalist. And again, um, find a unique way to tell stories of players and teams. My mom is not a big sports fan, so I always felt if I could give her one of my stories and she kind of enjoyed it, that I did a good job.
Awesome. Yeah. I kind of have a similar story myself. That's whenever I'd say like in high school, that's when I knew I wanted to do like sports journalism because I took a
Yeah.
class. It's the rest is history.
Yeah.
Now, how do you feel like with your knowledge in print journalism translates to what you've done with the LA Times, Sports Illustrated, Sporting Tribune, the Messenger, and other notable publications?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times we get bogged down with, how we tell the story. And at the end of the day, it's the story. And I think at the end of the day, journalism is still the same, no matter whether it's in print or with the web or social
Mhm.
media. Like when I look at very popular YouTube videos or TikToks, I mean, at the end of the day, they're still trying to tell a story. Now, clearly with the TikTok, you're trying to do it quickly. With YouTube, you have some more time. But again, I think the 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 through line is you still have to tell the story. Now, I like to read. I like long form journalism. Now that's sort of gone by the wayside, but I think what's sort of replaced it for younger generations is documentaries. So when someone says, "Oh, did you watch the Netflix documentary on this player?" I'm familiar with the story because I read the book. So at the end of the day, it's how do you tell the story, and whether it's a player or a coach or a team, that's always the challenge that I have.
Mhm.
How do I make this story unique? I mean, for example, if you're doing a story on LeBron James, I mean, he's the most popular player in the world, so you have to figure out a way to kind of do it in a unique way. So that's always a fun challenge, I think. But regardless of what the vehicle might be, again, whether it's a podcast, by the way, how do you tell the story in a unique way?
That's great. Yeah. It's about finding that niche through storytelling as well.
Yeah.
Also, mind me asking, do you have a favorite sports documentary that you like to watch frequently, or?
Well, I love the 30 for 30 series. Just in general, the 30 for 30 series was amazing. I thought that they did a great job of telling stories that I had heard about it in a unique way.
Mhm.
Um, So I mean, you go down to the list of the great stories that they told. Yeah, it's just I like watching the documentaries sometimes of subjects that I'm familiar with and seeing if I see something new. And generally speaking, when players and coaches are removed from things, 20 years on down the line, I mean, it's remarkable how candid they are. So I'm trying to think of if there's one in particular. The story about Pablo Escobar and the Colombian soccer team in the 1994 World Cup, I thought
Mhm.
that was really well done. Because I was actually at that game in the Rose Bowl when the Colombian soccer player scored a goal in his own goal, and that was and then he went back to Colombia and he got killed, and it was remarkable to see the connection there between Pablo Escobar and the player.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
So one common word of advice I hear from lots of sports journalists such as yourself, even some that I've met in the past, was that you need to be familiar with all the elements of storytelling, whether that's being on air, writing, editing, or even in production. Now, why do you think that is exactly?
well, I think, for example, some of the best television journalists, I think if you look at their history, they were print journalists. And I think so, as long as you have that foundation of knowing how to tell a story, so whether you are a feature writer, whether you are a newspaper writer, if you have that sort of foundation of, okay, like here's how I do my job, I'm not just going to read a teleprompter, I'm not just going to read a script. I think that can help you. And I think certainly now it's even more true than before. Maybe 20 years ago, you could have just been a print journalist. I think now you have to know how to write. You have to know how to maybe do a podcast. You have to know how to do
Yeah,
social. You have to know how to do all these things. So I think they are all very important.
absolutely, absolutely. I read your most recent article published on the Messenger regarding Evan Walsh
Yeah.
and how he believes the NBA in-season tournament would strengthen the focus of professional basketball, even though we're still in the NFL season.
Yeah.
What's your take on the in-season tournament as a whole, reinforcing that attention for the NBA?
I've enjoyed it. I'm in Vegas. I'm gonna head to the championship game as we're taping this, and so I have enjoyed it a lot. I think the struggle for the NBA for many years was how do we get people to care about our product before Christmas? Again, so many casual fans think like the only time I'll start to watch is on Christmas Day when all those big games are on. And so they've really done a good job of figuring out a way to make these games in November and December count. The biggest surprise to me at the beginning was that the players bought in. I mean, I think I did not anticipate LeBron James and KD and these guys playing so hard. Again, games in November and December, generally players are trying to pace themselves. That's not been the case during these tournament games. And LeBron clearly, it looks like he wants to win this thing. So I think it's been a success. I think the bar was low, though. I mean, I think your goal at this point is just to get people to care about your product during the 2 months at the beginning of the season when they generally don't. So it's succeeded in that respect. Attendance is higher, TV viewership is higher. So I think it's been great.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a good platform to really give them that boost of
Yeah.
all for all the NBA fans to really just get back in the groove of oh, the NBA is coming back. So
Yeah.
that's a great take. Now, kind of to piggyback off of that, I see you posting lots of stories online, and since you tend to mentor younger journalists, how do you handle covering so many stories in such a short amount of time, and how do you really organize all of your all of your articles and things like that just whenever you go out and you're interviewing coaches and athletes and things like that? What's the process like with that?
Yeah, I mean, I generally like to schedule out my week in advance. Sometimes I'll do a full couple of weeks in advance where I'm like, okay, today I'm talking to this player or this coach. And then I try to, just to keep my mind fresh, I like to write 3 times a week, generally speaking. And there's no specific dates for that, like in terms of Tuesday, Thursday, or Sunday, for example. But I try to write 3 times a week. And then I like a variety of topics. So I mean, not that I'll pursue them specifically. Sometimes they will all be the same thing. For example, with the tournament here in Vegas, they've all been generally the same about the tournament. But yeah, I mean, I try to map out my week so I don't go, for example, 1 week and certainly not 2 weeks without doing something. I try to stay fresh. Um, and I think that that helps. Yeah.
Okay, great. So there's some level of frequency there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like every other day if possible to kind of have something. So like I file a story, then I begin to work on a new one, and then I file that. Now, of course, there may be like longer form stories where that may take some time, that may take a week. Uh, but
Mhm.
yeah, generally like to write every couple of days.
Okay, great, great.
Yeah.
I hope to pass that along to other journalists as well. Um, so what's one thing you would tell a younger version of yourself that you know now that you wish you knew back then, as far as like, having a sense of belonging in the industry of sports journalism?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really to be patient. I talk to a lot of young journalists now, and I think maybe it's great that you can go from 0 to 100 quicker now because of different companies and different outlets and social media and things like that. So I mean, I deal with a lot of young journalists who, for example, like want to cover the Super Bowl like year one, and they're still in college, and I'm like, you got to pace yourself, and I would tell myself that because I was that same way. So I think it's important to have that drive. If you get the opportunity while you're in college or while you're in school to cover the Olympics or the Super Bowl, which I know happens, definitely appreciate that and know that that's not common, and kind of always have that drive to get back, because the one thing is there's no guarantee in this field. I think in like golf fields probably now, but really in sports journalism now, it's um for years it was like, if you got hired by a certain company, like maybe that might be your job for 20 years. I mean, that's really not the case anymore. So if you can kind of be in the moment and be appreciative of the opportunity that you have, uh but again, have that drive to say, listen, like that's my goal. And so yeah, I mean, I always try to stress to my younger journalists, whether they're friends or colleagues or whether they work at the Tribune, I just want them to know, listen, just be patient and it will happen in due time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm learning now, as I just finished college, that patience is virtue, and
Yeah.
opportunities like that present themselves. You never know who you might meet within that program who can get you to where you really want to be.
Yeah.
So, one of the goals of Impact Learning Institute is to inspire current and former students like myself to really find their way in the business of sports, and to really just, as I mentioned before, have a sense of belonging, find their sense of belonging, find their purpose in that business. So, how do you think you've inspired, students like me, or, young journalists like me?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that. Hopefully, some other students can. But here's what I will say. I think, when I was coming up, there was no Persian sports journalists that I remember reading or seeing. A lot of Persians are sports fans, but I came from a family that success was if you were a doctor or if you were a lawyer, and it's been really heartwarming and humbling whenever I see a young sports journalist who's Persian or has a different background, and they say, seeing you and seeing your name let me know that this was possible. So, and still, we have a long way to go in sports journalism. When you look at the numbers still in terms of the number of sports journalists that are white male, hopefully in due time that'll um, change a little, it change a lot, but like, change in due time. And so, but that's been really humbling for me to see, whether any minority journalist saying, seeing you on television or seeing your byline, that you didn't change your name, that you kept your name, and that inspired me. That's been really cool.
That's great. Yeah. I feel like as a journalist of color in particular, we we want to see those numbers change, and
Yeah,
there's still such a huge gap between between who you see on television, who you see publishing and editing and things like that. But thank you for that, Arash.
of course.
Um, that's incredible, man. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah.
Um, this has been great. This has been a great conversation to learn a little bit more about your background and how, we as journalists can really just be outstanding.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure talking to you and talking to the class and keeping in touch. And one more piece of advice I would give, you've done such a great job of keeping in touch, and those small things really count, and so at the end of the day, and I think I told your class this, I mean, when you're at the beginning of your career, that is your time to reach out to as many journalists as possible that you look up to or that you read, that you see on TV, you hear their podcasts. You'd be amazed at the number that say, "Yeah, I have time to hop on a Zoom or to hop on a call or to grab a coffee." So, yeah, just good luck to everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Arash.
Thanks.